elected members are continuously involved. With every Gram Panchayat, we have a group of about 22 people, all the elected representatives, representatives of Mahila Mandal, that is women's group, representatives of self-help groups. If there is what I should say, farmers club, their representatives. And throughout 2 years, we found out of 22, roughly 18 people per meeting are attending. And they are taking it very seriously. I will show you at the end a couple of photographs. There are about 6,000 women who have taken up a responsibility to take a message to the village that these are the RH services, these are our entitlements, government is not making any mehrbani by providing them, and its quality has to be assured, and for that we have to make our local government accountable. So with that we went ahead. I have 4 more minutes, I think. Yeah, okay, 6 minutes, good. The challenges that we have, real challenge was the real beneficiaries of this whole program, the doctors, the in charges of primary health care, in charges of community health care. They were not at all ready to come forward. The frontline health workers were coming forward, but they were quite afraid that we are talking not to go for terminal methods of contraceptives, and temporary contraceptives are not available, the supply is not there. How do you bridge the gap? Because in every monthly meeting, the stock checking is to be done. How many condoms are there? How many pills are there? And why the supply is not coming? So making accountable, and when the local government is asking you the question, you have to answer. It's not an NGO or civil society like us whom they can wish it away. We never ask a single question to the health department. We made the local government to ask because it is their responsibility. Then a small research was conducted with the 30 medical doctors who are working in our area of PSCs and CSCs to know their attitude towards LGBTQ and others. Only one doctor among the 30 said they have a right to get services. About 10 of them said all these people should be given a medical treatment to make them normal. Now, how do you deal with these people? That's the challenge. The next challenge was a semi-literate woman who is a farmer, whose clothes are not very fashionable. If she stands up and asks the in charge of primary health center, why the condoms are not supplied to my sub-center, the doctors really feel very uncomfortable. They were never been asked this kind of questions. So this is a project, I will not call it a project, it is a process going on. The last challenge before us, which I will speak, is about the small family norms. There was a 2-child norm imposed upon the elected representatives of local government. We fought for 5 years with the support of these representatives, and my state became the first state in the country which removed that, freed people. But small family has become a norm. I am collecting the data on couples who are adopting terminal method of contraceptives, completing their family formation. And what I find, 25% families are only male child families. 36% families got 1 plus 1. Only 14% families got more than 2 girl children. If I do the sex ratio, child sex ratio of these couples, Wherever there is only 2 children, I find the girl-child sex ratio is 472 girls per 1,000 boys. And this is a data of 10 years covering 90% population of my state. And this is horrible for us. This small family norm with now fertility rate is going below the replacement of 1.8. How do you have a so-called rights of what I should say, sex ratio? I don't know, because the moment you say gender-based sex ratio, it should be gender equally based sex ratio, you actually say that there is no chance for a second successive girl child to be born, because it is 1 plus 1. That's what the government says. The government of India symbol is one male and 1 female child, which means no chance for the second successive girl child to be born. That's what exactly is happening. That's the challenge we are facing. Let me use my couple of minutes left with
Your
me.
last minute.
Yes. Just hold on. Where is gone? Now this is the Gram Panchayat, people who can read Devanagari. What they are writing, this our Panchayat is committed towards the reproductive health services, rights of the reproductive health rights. And this kind of putting up a board is very important. This is giving a message that the local government not only passing the resolutions, but writing it on the wall that we are committed to safeguard, promote reproductive health rights. There is also Gram Panchayats are writing about their current sex ratio at birth. They are also listing out how many women are pregnant who are getting reproductive health care services, what is the status of that services. They are putting it on the wall. Bringing it out in community. The moment you bring it out in community, transparency is ensured, accountability is ensured. And that is where we are. I think I have used my 1 minute, Frederica. Thank you very much. Yeah, let me close it down.
Thank you very much, Subhas.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very clear on how you make the duty bearers responsible in your communities, and also how you are reinforcing we all start now hesitating to talk about gender, no? How to reinforce the issues in the advantage of women. I mean, what we need to do is to put the women's rights central state, and specifically in the family planning area. Thank you. Let me move to the next speaker, Dakshita Vakramaratna. He's from IPPF Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me welcome all of you for this interesting post-lunch session. I see the interest from the audience. I'm Dakshita Vikramaratna, I'm a member of the South Asian Regional Youth Network, and also I run this YPA youth-led network in Sri Lanka, which is being supported by UNFPA Sri Lanka. And first, before starting my presentation, I would like to share a small story of one of my friends in Sri Lanka. She's a girl, she's one of my colleagues, but I'm sure her story would be similar to many stories, especially in the subcontinent.
Archana grew up in Gampaha. She lived the most ordinary life. She went to school, tuition classes, played netball. She was happy. When she was 16, she started an affair with Gayan, who was in her class. He was funny, caring. I fell in love with him. We spent a lot of time together. Archini started going back to school for A-levels, and when she just turned 17, she became pregnant.
I felt sick. My mom took me to the hospital. I had missed my period. It was terrifying. I called Gayan first thing when I got home. I was really scared and confused. I didn't know what to do.
Her family was confused too. Her aunt suggested getting an abortion. In Sri Lanka, abortion is restricted except when the mother's life is in danger.
But my mom said we shouldn't because it is restricted and it is not safe.
Archini stopped going to school, but Gayan continued to go to school. Some of Gayan's friends knew about Archini, and so did a few teachers.
A friend called me and told me that the school knows I couldn't face them anymore. I wanted to die.
Archini's parents were called from school. When her mother went to the school, the principal asked to take her out of the school. Her mother's plea to allow the child to come back to school after the delivery to do A-levels was refused. Archini's parents were ashamed. They sent her away to her uncle Ajit in Gaul. Ajit was Archini's mother's youngest brother. Gradually, Ajit started making sexual advances towards her. He started sexually abusing her.
He said I had nothing to lose. He said my character was already scarred.
She did not know it was not her fault. She did not know she did not have to suffer sexual abuse in silence because it was not her fault. After the delivery, she came back to her parents' house. Now she works at a hotel as a receptionist. Archini's story is one of many stories about lost opportunities. If there were correct interventions, her story could have been different.
Okay, right. Thanks. So the panel specifically highlight the challenges with regard to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on speaking about the challenges we have, speaking about the issues we work on in Sri Lanka. But I would like to mention 6 interventions rather, which are solution-based, which we as a young person, we as youth-led organizations working towards achieving sexual and reproductive health rights while working towards achieving gender equality. So I would like to call these 6 C's. There are 6 C's. So the first C is the changes in policies. Just like Subhash rightly mentioned, there are so many punitive laws in our countries which do not realize the human rights of especially young girls and women. So what we basically do in Sri Lanka is advocating for the government to change the policies. We don't have comprehensive sexuality education schools, but as the youth-led network, we are following the UNESCO International Technical Guidance, which was launched in 2012. And Yoni was talking about the comprehensive sexual education, which is not only about sexual and reproductive health, which is also about relationships, preventing of gender-based violence, values and attitudes, human development. So we are advocating for the government to have reforms in the education system and to have comprehensive sexual education in place. So that is the first C. The second C is the community education. The comprehensive sexual education comes again. We have to educate the communities in order to prevent gender-based violence. We have to engage men in prevention of violence. That's why we are having conferences like, that's the importance of this conference. And it's quite important to trickle down these effects to the community level so that the men in the community levels, the young boys, would be educated on respecting each other. 3 is capacity building. The third C is capacity building. And capacity building is not only about building the capacity of the staff members of the organization, but also the building the capacity of individuals who would be able to say no, who would be able to develop life skills. And if you're traveling in a bus, if you see another guy is harassing a woman, you should have the capacity to stand up and talk to that guy and say, stop this. The fourth C is community mobilization. We had to mobilize the communities in order to make a huge ha-ho in our countries and to establish gender equality in the society. And we have to give leadership and ownership to the communities of these campaigns, of this human rights approach to development. Then only we will be able to have a sustainable mechanism where throughout the rest of our lives there will be gender equality. And one example we do in Sri Lanka is, especially in the subcontinent, cricket is not treated as a sport but rather as a religion. So what we do in our country is that we invite celebrities who are cricketers like Kumar Sangakkara, Virendra Sehwag. So they would speak about gender equality in TV. They would join us in the campaigns we do in the field, the field levels and the community levels, where they'll be speaking about gender equality. And a lot of people who respect them, who follow them, who even have their haircuts, who wear the same T-shirts, would definitely follow what they say. And that would be a start to get comprehensive information on gender equality. Fifth C is communication. Communication for changing strategies. And this C is specifically talking about the role media has to play in achieving gender equality, because if you take young people, when we are engaging young people with our work, we have to understand that there's a lot of competition in the education sector, competition in the employment sector. Young people are sort of structured in this millennium to compete with each other and grab a lot of opportunities. So while running this rat race, it's difficult for us to get them apart from it and to make them understand about gender equality. So media has a role to play, because they are watching TV, there's social media, there's internet, movies, advertisements. All these institutions, media institutions, has to be sensitized properly in a way that the media would be respecting gender equality and there wouldn't be a discrimination based on the advertisements. And the final C is coalition building. This is not a work of one particular organization. At the end of the day, we don't need to say that X organization achieved gender equality. It's about all of us getting together and working as a whole team and reaching towards a society where gender equality is appreciated. Thank you.
Wow, Rashida, very good. Thank you very much, and also for sharing this rather touchy movie, and it gave us a lot of insight on the challenges you were discussing with us all. Thank you so much. And we go to our last speaker, and I'm pushing them a little bit so that we have enough time also to have a little bit more interactive session. Desmond, you are the next one in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. I must start by maybe just saying I agree with all the wisdom that went before me, the ideas, the thrusts, the points that were raised. And declare up front that I'm using this space to, I've got an agenda to seek to say to us, as we seek to broaden our engagement around these issues and deepen them and reach a wider communities of gatekeepers and power holders and duty bearers, we should seriously consider engaging faith communities and cultural communities in our programming and engagement. And I put this because other things have been said very eloquently. Largely because where I come from, especially if I speak for myself, the African continent is a very religious community and in many ways very cultural, with traditional leaders having power, influence, and authority. But also that those are the spaces where the norms that you're speaking about in many ways are formed and nurtured and sustained, including the negative ones. We also are aware that the women continue to be believers in many ways, despite whatever we may think of religion and culture. They remain there, and I think there's an agency there that we can tap into. If we use the language of power, all I'm saying is that religious and cultural communities hold tremendous power and influence over how we do things and what we do. And if we keep on not including them in our response and engagement, we are actually missing an opportunity to further the work that we do to reach much more big audiences, which remain in many ways captives. But I say this also being aware that it is not as easy as simply stepping in and saying to somebody, talk about these things. We know people of faith in many cultural communities, we don't like to talk about sex. Well, even as we do it in those spaces. But also there are challenges about talking about reproduction, forget about talking about rights. The clip around teenage pregnancies, for instance, reminds us of, for instance, how these communities, this is a different response by the mother, but generally when somebody is in that state, the response is very, very, very negative. So I'm saying we also know that these communities frown upon things, for instance, when you talk about LGBTQI issues or sex, men who have sex with men, when you talk about termination of pregnancy, for instance, as a right, the issue of choice, that Johnny referred to, the issue of contraceptions, become anathema and taboo in those spaces. And many of our people live with that, buy into that, and define their ways of living around those issues. I'm also giving the Gina sister on ICPD that we should also be aware of the growing reactionary movement. In my notes, I talked about the excess of fundamentalism that's largely driven by religious institutions and traditional institutions, comprising U.S. evangelical processes that invade all the world, the Vatican pronouncements, Arab Islamic ideologies, African traditional leaders, or the resurgence of what we'll call the African Renaissance, with it coming cultural renaissance and re-emergence of some of the negative values that are imposed on us, and of course a good number of African religious leadership who hold all of these, what we may call, harmful values. So as we seek to enter the gate, we also need to be conscious of, we are committed as men, as activists, as feminists in this room and this conference. If you are committed to engaging on these issues, we need to be alive to the realities that doing so also requires of us to have particular call it bravery or courage to engage with and confront things that you don't normally talk about. I think the practical question in our programming as we go forward would be, how do we put these issues on the agenda of these communities? How do you open the gates? How do you access them? And I'm not offering any solutions here, but also once the gates are opened, as it has, I mean, I should have said it up front, a bit of a commercial here. UNFPA has developed a framework globally around working with faith communities on these issues. I would market it for them to say, if you can find it, I think it's on our website, very helpful tool that has been developed and updated over a period of time. But the real question is, and that what it seeks to do is, once you've accessed these communities, the question remains, how do you then develop transformative programming that does not buy into harmful practices and beliefs that are negative that may be held within those communities? And how do we use those spaces to prevent, or at least begin to push back, reverse the backlash that we currently talk about and see in our spaces? And how do we take along people of faith? I mentioned the fact that women, despite all the things that they suffer in the spaces, remain loyal in many ways. And I believe, from where I'm sitting, that there is a degree of agency that we have not tried to understand in those spaces, to say, despite the policies and other things, why do we still have women as the majority of adherents to faith processes, for instance, and how do many continue to propagate and all to cultural values? Maybe the last point I want to make is, it's got 3 sub-points, is how do we then, in our approach to engaging religion and men, learn from our work in engaging men broadly that we've done over the past couple of years around these issues. well, one for me is to understand that these sectors or communities are, in a sense, sites of struggle. They are not monolithic, that there are forces for and there are opportunities of liberatory forces that would act against those issues. And that requires of us to be able to play what I call an insider-outsider role or supporter-critic role that identifies what is it that can be used, that works in those spaces, in their histories and in their processes, so that you, as you expose harmful practices and norms, you also identify and amplify positive norms and liberation ideals and forms that are there, from history, that religion in particular, for instance, has played major roles, including culture, that traditional leaders who became, for instance, liberation heroes in struggles all over the world. I think it's also important that in the same way that as you approach men, we don't condemn all men as evil, that we avoid a zero-sum game and say how do we walk along and journey. Is there anything that we can self-faith communities and say, as you want you to be involved in this thing, there is a benefit for you as well, cultural communities? And I think there are, largely around social cohesion issues, where every traditional leader, I think, cares about their own social cohesion, and I think faith leaders have been known to seek to have those things. Issues around health benefits for men as well, for women and for children, for everybody. Issues, reduced burden of care on women in particular, care in the context of illnesses and diseases like HIV, social cohesion that may promote caring communities where everybody shares the burdens and the roles around these things, including compassionate caring for children, happier children, and I think more educated children who grow up in safer spaces when we're able to have better programs, issues around, and I heard Gina very well, girl and women empowerment, in a sense that how do you create a space where women and girls can be what they're supposed to be, what they can be, without being disrupted by all the things that we do as men to inhibit their own progress. And also the question of healthier and more equitable relationships that emanate from a space where the ideals of SRHR are taken into consideration. And I think the other thing that we can do is to, as part of looking at the other side of these communities, other than the negative one, I believe that wherever we come from and whatever people believe, that there are deep repositories of wealth that can be unearthed, maybe not packaged as it was in the past, but things we can learn from. And I want to make one example from the African context. We grew up, and I've heard many spaces, people saying Africans don't know how to talk about sex and sexuality. That was not done. That's why there's difficulties. But I know, even as young as I am, that not too long ago, there were systematic processes of sexuality education for young people, and there were proper systems. You went to schools, traditional schools, but also that family members had particular responsibilities. Uncles and aunts were the ones that you go to when you talk about sex and sexuality, that actually there were ways that were taught of contraceptions in those communities, particular ways of having sex without falling pregnant. And young boys and girls were taught those things in their idiom by particular people. These things may have disappeared, but the point I'm raising is simply that we cannot allow people to say in our cultures and religions we didn't talk about these things. We talked about them in different languages, and we can go back into those cultures and find ways of saying this can be done. And I think we need to interrogate, my last point, the role of religion and culture in the context of our determination to uphold and promote rights for all. It's a tricky one, I think, in many ways. In some of our secular states, for instance, we say people have the right to believe and to hold on to their religion and cultural values without any interference. What do we do, for instance, when a religion practice publicly says to young girls and boys, we cannot access contraceptives, for instance? I know that in my own vocabulary, that is a harmful practice because it can lead to people contracting other things than pregnancies that may not be reversible. Yeah, I will stop here.